as you'll see as we move forward in statistics, as soon as we define something strictly, like what a population is, what a parameter is, what a sample is, what a statistic are, real life makes things a little bit hairier than that and a little bit harder to figure out exactly what we mean. And these 4 specific concepts of population parameters, samples, and statistics are so difficult for students to first wrap their heads around as we get through this that I want to go through a couple of examples to clarify exactly what those words mean in particular situations. So let's start by talking about guns here in Casper. Okay, so we want to figure out the percentage of Casper citizens that support universal background checks for buying firearms. Okay, so we've got somebody that goes to a shooting range at Wyoming Gun Company and speaks to every customer that came in on a Sunday afternoon. And only 1% of the people in her sample support universal background checks. So that seems pretty definitive, but let's actually look at this a little bit more carefully. So let's start off by looking at just what these words are. Okay, so first off, what is the sample here? Well, the sample is the data that she actually got, not what she tried to get, but what we actually got. So this is going to be a response from the people that came in on a Sunday afternoon to this one particular shooting range. Okay, that's what the sample is. So customers that came in on a Sunday afternoon to Wyoming Gun Company's shooting range in Casper, right? That seems very specific, and these samples tend to be very specific to make it clear exactly who we can generalize this to. Okay, so is this a census? Well, no, right? I mean, kind of, but not. It depends on what we're trying to actually do. To answer that question, I need to answer what the population is, right? Because a census is where my sample is the entire population. Okay, so I need to know for sure what the population is. Well, here she's trying to see what percentage of citizens of Casper support background checks. And all she did was go look at the customers at Wyoming Gun Company on a Sunday afternoon. So this is absolutely not a census of Casper citizens, not even close. Okay, so no, this is not a census. Now, what's our statistic? All right, so this is something I've calculated from the sample to help us understand what that sample really looks like. And it needs to be numeric somehow. Okay, so here it says 1% of the people in her sample support universal background checks. Well, 1% is certainly a number, all right? And it's describing the sample. So that's our statistic here. The statistic here is that 1% of the people in the sample support universal background checks. Okay, I'm going to contrast that with the parameter in just a moment here because those are related but not the same. All right, so what was the intended population? Well, this researcher was trying to study all Casper residents or all Casper citizens, whatever, and all they did was go to a shooting range on one day. So the intended population clearly is Casper citizens, but what's the actual population? I would say people that go to the shooting range at Wyoming Gun Company, right? They may be a different kind of people that go to a shooting range somewhere else, right? And we may even want to add on there that go there on Sunday afternoons because going there specifically on a Sunday may be a different kind of person than other days. Now, that's getting maybe a little bit strict, but at the very least, we need to say that, look, the only people I got any information from are people that were at the shooting range at Wyoming Gun Company. Okay, so if you don't go to the shooting range at Wyoming Gun Company, you have no chance of being selected here. That's what the actual population is. People that go to the shooting range at Wyoming Gun Company. All right, so now that we actually know for sure what that population is, now we can very clearly say, one, that's definitely not a census because there are people that still go to Wyoming Gun Company at the shooting range and didn't go that particular Sunday afternoon. Okay, so this is definitely not a census. And then what's our parameter? Okay, so this is this last thing. I want to point out what the purpose of a parameter is first because that'll help make this make sense. Or actually what the purpose of a statistic is. We're gathering that statistic to make an estimate of the parameter. So it doesn't make any sense for me to say, like, to gather a sample that says, 80% of our students are under 21 when I'm trying to estimate the actual age of the students, right? Like, are they 22? Are they 20? Like, that's comparing a percentage to an actual number. They need to be the same kind of thing. If I'm trying to estimate an average for the population, my statistic from my sample better also be an average. If I'm trying to estimate the percentage in the population, it better be a percentage in my sample. That's what I mean when I'm saying it's the same kind of thing. And it's got to be specifically the same kind of thing. So here we're trying to estimate the percentage of people that support universal background checks here in Casper. Okay, so I better have my sample statistic be the percentage that support universal background checks, okay? And my parameter is also the percentage that support universal background checks. They are both that. I need to add on some words. So if you're on an exam and you just write out the percentage of people that support universal background checks, you're going to get half credit because you're most of the way there. But then the sample and the statistic and the parameter are exactly the same thing. We need to add on something. So what would make that the statistic is it's the percentage of people in our sample that support universal background checks. And then the parameter will be the percentage of all Casper residents that support universal background checks. Okay, so you see the difference there? The idea is who we're actually making a claim about. The statistic is only making a claim about the sample we actually have data of, right? And the parameter is about the group as a whole that we're trying to study, and I generally won't have a solid number for that, right? Like, so the parameter is technically a number because it's a percentage, but it's a number that I don't know. If we go back to this setup here, we see we specifically have this 1%, right? Because all we do is we look at our sample and then we calculate it, and I know that number is 1% for a fact. I don't know what it is in the population as a whole. So in the population as a whole, I just say the percentage of people in Casper that support universal background checks. That's a parameter. My statistic will be the 1% of people in the sample that support universal background checks. So I'm actually going to know the value of that number.